Hello again, Anthony here. Welcome back to the Break the Twitch podcast for a special edition episode with my friend Joshua Becker. He's the author of best-selling books The More of Less and The Minimalist Home. With his new book, Things That Matter, Overcoming Distractions to Pursue a More Meaningful Life, it comes out April 19th, everywhere books are sold. In this special edition episode, we catch up on what I've been up to, what inspired Joshua to write this new book, and discuss themes from the book around identifying distractions that prevent us from living a more meaningful life. It is highly conversational, very laid-back episode, so I hope you enjoy the conversation. You can find more from Joshua at becomingminimalist.com, and do pre-order his new book anywhere books are sold, coming out April 19th. Thanks again. Enjoy the episode, and let's get it started. Joshua, welcome to the podcast.
It is good to be here. Second time, right? Second time,
part deux. There are several firsts happening right now. One, this is my first podcast episode that I've recorded in over 2 years at this point. So this is a special edition of the podcast. And it's been 3 years since you were on the first time. So you are not only the first guest to make a return to this podcast, but this is also the first not in-person version of it. So wow. We're tackling new territory here.
What could possibly be so exciting that I would get an exclusive podcast interview and a repeat?
We'll have to uncover that as we move forward into the podcast interview.
I look forward to being interviewed, but what have you been doing? 2 years, huh? What are you up to?
2 years. I knew this question was coming, and I knew that it would be a little bit difficult to answer. The primary thing over the last 2 years, and I guess through the majority of the pandemic, is I've been doing just a lot of personal work, a lot of therapy and personal development stuff. And it's been a very interesting time, especially in the last year, where a lot of my work with Break the Twitch has been always in line with personal growth and intentionality and really my own explorations of what it's like. I didn't start out talking about this, but what it's like to be a person who has ADHD, attention deficit disorder, in a world exploring and pursuing intentionality. And so it's always been on that path, but the interesting thing is much below the surface, there's always kind of stuff going on emotionally, things going on with patterns and all that kind of stuff that really got, I think, pretty intense for me. And it got to a place where I was having difficulty sort of writing about what I was going through while it was happening on the blog and creating content about it. And so I felt myself having to pull back from the medium a bit.
Stuff that you didn't want to share, or stuff that you didn't feel you had processed enough to be able to share, or all of the above?
Really, so maybe there's a little bit of fear there, but I think it was mostly the latter, which is that every week going through this, some new aspect of the thing that I would have discovered unraveled itself and showed itself.
You and Amy are good? Everything's good with you and Amy, right? Yeah, from what I hear. So.
Things are great. We we have really taken the opportunity over the last 2 years. We were already working at home together for since 2016. So in that sense, adjusting to the pandemic was not too different from what we had already been doing, but it definitely gave us some space to the opposite of space, but it gave us some time and some energy to really work through some things that have been really beneficial. So let's see. I suppose it's my turn to ask you some questions now.
Oh, this doesn't have to all be about me, Anthony.
You're hilarious.
You know what? You knew I was writing the book, and I'm sure I've talked to you about what I was writing, but we certainly haven't talked since you actually received the book and got a chance to read it and So I'm interested to hear your thoughts, and if it was different than you thought it was going to be, or if you loved it way more than you thought you would. I don't know. I'm kind of interested to hear a good friend of mine talk about the book.
Yeah, definitely. So what I found, so I think what deserves an introduction is the fact that you have this book, Things That Matter, coming out mid-April, right? April 15th?
April 19th.
19th.
April 19th. Things That Matter, Overcoming Distraction to Pursue a More Meaningful Life.
Mm-hmm. Wonderful. I love the title. It's a great book. I'll just start off with that. It's a great book. I just finished reading it yesterday, so just in time for our conversation, which is wonderful. And I did find it quite interesting that I was there at that session, that workshop with Charlie, and I remember you going, you know what? I got it. You have this moment of like, you know what? I think I know what my next book's going to be. And that was pretty cool to read the story of that in the book and how you yourself were selecting in that moment, what's the thing that I really want to focus on.
Did I tell you that night I wanted to write a book?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yes.
That's how I remember it. Yeah, it's always interesting. Someone asked me, I was on a podcast about speaking, and they asked me about a story that I tell, and they're like, so how much of that is actually true? And I said, I think all of it's true, but you tell a story so many times, and hard to remember which of the details are actually true or not. And I'm happy to hear that, because I remember being there and thinking, I need to write this book. So someone who was there can vouch for me. I appreciate that.
I can definitely...
I forgot you were there. How terrible is that? I forgot you were there.
It's fine.
Oh.
It's fine. I was a little upset that I didn't see my
now.
name in the book, right there. And my good friend Anthony stood up and started applauding, and then everyone else stood up, started applauding. I got it. No, I'm not offended. It was right after I had moved. Yeah.
So quick background. So the Charlie Gilkey wrote a book called Start Finishing, and he put on a workshop here in the Phoenix area, and it was all about finishing, like completing projects. And he asked us, he said, he said, I want you to think about something specific as we talk about some of these principles. And so at the very beginning, he said, close your eyes and answer this question. If you were to die today, what is the one thing you would regret not accomplishing or not completing, not finishing? I forget what it was specifically. And I, in that moment, I had just come off a retreat where I had spoken about a lot of these issues and things. And so my mind was just in that spot thinking about those conversations. And then, I thought to myself, I would be upset that I didn't write this book that takes the idea of minimalism beyond physical possessions, but what are some of the other distractions, I think, that keep us from meaningful things. So that was it. And what'd you come up with? Do you remember what you thought of in that moment?
No.
Okay, that's
No.
fine. You probably already finished it. That's why.
Yeah, well.
It just took me 3 years.
Well, I would say your project is probably a little bigger than in scope than what I would have been thinking about at the time. When was that? Was that mid 2019?
It must have been fall. It must have been fall of 2019, early fall 2019. Early fall 2019. I bet that week I emailed either my editor or my agent and said, what do you think about this? And then kind of just sat in the back of my head a little bit. Both people, I ended up emailing both, and they both thought it was a healthy project. But it wasn't until after the pandemic, until after the pandemic hit that I sent out the book proposal. Must not have been until then, because I remember sending an email to my agent like, did I miss my window? Are we still publishing books? Did I miss my window? But
is this still an industry, a thing that happens?
Yeah, exactly.
I do remember you literally tapping your pencil or pen like 3 times on the table, just kind of giving it a couple taps, and you had that moment. And it was like clear as day. And And you just kind of look up and you go, I think I know what my next book's going to be about.
Wow. Now, when I finished The Minimalist Home, I didn't think I would ever write another book again. It was, it's not a medium that I love writing for. I love the 600 to 1,000 word blog post articles. I feel like I was built to write in that type of word count. 60,000 words is always difficult for me and requires a lot of me. I always gain about 20 or 25 pounds when I do it. And it adds a lot of stress on my life. I didn't think I was going to do it. And so at that workshop, when the idea came to me, and if I tapped my pen a couple times, I was like really debating, do I want to go through this again or not? And I'm glad I did.
So that actually is a perfect segue here, because you chose something despite clearly it being something that puts a lot of additional stress on you. It changes your life in a substantial way in terms of what is required of you and your work. And it sounds, I remember that around the second book, that it was pretty stressful and you're like pretty unsure if that was the route you wanted to go. So what did that look like? I mean, this is you stepping into essentially what I see as the underpinnings of the book, which is choosing the things that might be more difficult, that we might be afraid of, that we might feel might be an additional burden, but it's the thing that really matters. So what changed for you, or what did that look like going into this process again? Did you change how you approached it from the second book to this one?
Yes. But if I were to take even a step back, I think one of the things that I've always loved about Charlie, who this podcast is about now, apparently, is he's always, the first time I heard him speak about work and the importance of work and the value of work, I just aligned with him right away, because I am not a, hey, we should stop working. We should all go lay on the beach. We all work too hard and life should be more about doing nothing. Like that's an extreme. Obviously you can obviously be working too much, but my worldview has never been that work is something that we should be trying to get out of, but instead that good work is meaningful and significant, and there's fulfillment in there. And I think entirely ingrained in the idea of work is that it's not going to be easy. Like, work is different than play, and even doing work that you love is going to require some effort. There are going to be some things about it that you don't like. I just made a comment the other day to someone who was talking about a stress-free life, and I'm like, I don't even think I want to live an entirely stress-free life. Like, if you don't have any stress in life, then like what are you trying to solve? Like, if there isn't something that you want to be accomplishing and want to be doing. So just a step back. So I wasn't afraid to know that writing a book was going to require some work and effort and add some stress onto my life. I wasn't afraid of that, but there is a balance of, is it worth the stress? Is there something better that I could be doing that would serve just as much good, that would be not necessarily easier, but more aligned with who I was? Like, I think you're always kind of balancing those things out. So the other part of your question about, like, was there some things differently that I did? So yeah, I had an editor named Eric Stanford who really served as an editor for my first book, The More of Less, and really, I think, took 600 to 1,000 word blog articles and like showed me how to put it into a book. He was also my editor for The Minimalist Home, where when I was really stuck at some at some different points in the book, he stepped in and took an even larger role in, like, let me help you write some of these aspects and let me help you put your thoughts into words. And so when I was going into things that matter, it was going into things that matter with the understanding that he would help me in the same way that he did with the Minimalist Home. And so when I emailed my agent about writing another book, I'm like, I think I'm going to write another book. I need to talk to Eric. I got to make sure it's something that he's on board to help me write. Otherwise, I'm not going to do it because I know I couldn't do it myself. So yeah, I got him on board much earlier with taking a more expanded role in editing. Not a ghostwriter, but more than an editor. Like, so somewhere in between. I think his name's even listed on the inside cover of Joshua Becker with Eric Stanford, just because there's going to be a big role that he was going to play.
Nice. I will say I really appreciate you sharing that aspect of the writing process. I think there is a certain perception in just about all industries that we don't really share the help we get. And it definitely, as someone who, seeing you having written now 3 books, having built, all of these different things, it's nice to hear that even you as this super author producing this stuff, you like know how to ask for help, and that sometimes you need help too. Like that's a big thing, right? Because you do have this message, you clearly have this passion for the work that you're doing, and it comes through in the book. Like, it's a great book, very inspiring, with a lot of wonderful examples, of just different stories from your own life and others. And so it's nice to see you as a human from that perspective too, it gives us all a little more permission to ask for help in that way, when we, instead of just punishing ourselves, stepping through something. So it sounds like that change, you went in with, instead of halfway through going like, ugh, I need to, you created a support structure up front, and you learned from that experience, which is, that's like gold right there.
Yeah. So true. So true.
Something that reminded me of earlier, that the concept of magical thinking, Melody Beattie, it talks about this in one of her books, that it's like, we think that, if I could just get that thing, I just need to turn this one corner, then everything will be fine. I won't have any stress. I'll live a good life. If I could just earn this much money, and then everything will be fine.
Yeah, I would say, so for me, it's about recognizing what I'm chasing or pursuing or desiring helps me accommodate or understand, or I don't know if appreciate is the right word, the stress and the difficulties that come along. So if my goal in life is just to make as much money as I possibly can, I think that's a pretty empty goal and not a real meaningful goal when we get to the end of life. It's fun. It allows us to do some things, but I don't know if we get to the end of our lives and we're like, man, I'm so glad I just made a ton of money. And so if the stress that I'm taking on in my life, or if the burden that I'm taking on, or if the hardships that I'm enduring are all a result of me just trying to make a bunch of money, then I think they're harder to understand, because it's like an obstacle in the way of getting to a finish line that doesn't really matter in the long run. Or if my whole goal is just to be as famous as I possibly can, or to be like the highest ranking person in the organization that I could possibly be, like when that's the goal, then I think the stress that we take upon ourselves isn't always appreciate or even wise. But if the goal is, hey, I want to be a good parent. I want to be a faithful spouse. I want to be a contributing member to society. I want to solve this problem that I see in the world. Then the stress that accompanies that, I think, is a little easier to. I'm missing the word. I don't know what the word is, but when stress comes because I'm chasing the right things, then I think it becomes easier to manage, understand, appreciate. I don't know the word there, and I hope I'm making some sense there. But anyway,
it definitely makes
sense. That's kind of the message of the book, right? Like when I just list these distractions that I think keep us from things that matter, things like money and possessions and fame and leisure and happiness. And when those are the things that we're chasing, and stress pops up, then it's a little less easy to. I still don't know the word.
I understand what you're getting at for sure.
Yeah.
It's like it's not for naught. It is like in the sense of it's not like this just malaligned. You're over here chasing more of the wrong thing and feeling a ton of stress while
easier
doing
to bear.
Yeah.
Easier to bear. Maybe I think of. Some of my friends who are raising special needs children, and it's stressful and it's hard work, but it's a burden that they don't mind bearing because it's love, right? It's meaningful and it's significant, and I think that just becomes a different type of stress to bear than I'm just trying to make as much money as I possibly can.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, in the book you say you can never have enough of the wrong thing, or something to that effect, and it feels like there's a certain alignment around that, right? It ties into this idea that you can chase the money and you're going to feel the stress, and then probably look to deal with that stress in a way because there isn't the same kind of symbiotic relationship with that stress. So like the love that comes, or the sort of in doing the extra work that it takes to raise a child with special needs, or just any sort of love-based initiative, if you will. And maybe you can turn that on its head when it's like, well, I want to make as much money as I can so that I can donate as much money as I can throughout my life. Like maybe there's additional layers that realign that purpose in a way. So a lot of stuff to explore there. That's really, that's interesting.
Yeah. No, that was a good point that you made about, because I think one of the problems with money, one of the problems with possessions, fame, whatever it is that those things never fully satisfy. And so we can make way more, we can have more money than we ever thought we would have and still not feel full, fulfilled, still not feel complete. And so we just keep chasing more money, but like we're never going to reach the end goal where it's going to provide for us what we're wanting it to provide. And so there's no, symbiotic relationship. That's a good way of putting it, where I can add more stress to get more money, and then I get there and it hasn't, provided that meaning that I thought it would. And there's not that positive feedback loop of investing a day in work that matters or solving a problem in the world, and you get to lay your head on the pillow, and even though you're exhausted, you feel good about the work that you did because you knew it was for things of lasting purpose and meaning.
Mm-hmm.
I was thinking how it's great to work on ourselves and figure out ourselves and overcome things ingrained in us or things that we learn, like understanding all of that. But there seems like there needs to be and this is probably pretty common, but maybe I'll just say it for anyone who it's helpful or not. Like there needs to be a goal for that, I think, that goes beyond ourselves, right? Like I'm not fixing myself. I'm not, I shouldn't even use that phrasing. I'm not going through therapy just for my own selfish thing, but I want to be the best version of myself that I can be so that I can accomplish the most good in the world for the most number of people. So even in that, that just came to mind when you were talking about like having that goal or having something outside of myself that I know that this is going to achieve in the long run. I would think would be more motivational in the long run, right? But I don't know.
Absolutely.
Maybe you can correct anything. I just said.
No, you're absolutely right. It's very tricky because it is easy to get lost in all of it. You did a great job of changing the language around fixing, because I think for many of us that is it's very easy to feel like we need to fix ourselves. There's something wrong inherently. And so yeah, I mean, no one's ever going to be perfect. No one's going to be perfect. And everyone is dealing with different things depending on neurotypicality or not. And so this idea of fixing ourselves is one that kind of we need to let go, because we're not inherently broken. It's just maybe there are things that we have created unconsciously that have protected us at one point, and now they get in the way of our success, or sabotage our ability to show up for ourselves and for other people, or self-advocate, or like I said, a perfect example is this conversation being that, I'm methodical. I was like, oof, there's a whole book I got to read, right? But no, I was able to go, let's just see. And, I just worked through it, and over 2 or 3 days, I read the whole thing. And instead of getting on my phone to check my email, I just picked up the book and read that. So, like these types of changes and things really do. And now it is in the spirit of what you're talking about. Now we're able to have a better conversation about the book, and I have more context for all of it. And that serves something far beyond me. And so, yeah, I definitely think that this book for me, and ironically or not, came at a wonderful time, because it definitely is like, it's hard. I mean, it's a hard book. And now I've spent the last 2 years facing a lot of these statistics about, looking at how much am I on my phone? What are the ways I'm coping without realizing it? And so I wasn't surprised by a lot of the data in there, and that chapter that maybe might be a little tough. It might, give people a bit of a nudge there in terms of the reality of what's going on and the fears that are holding us back. It's some real stuff, but yeah, that definitely came at the right time.
And it is a book about far more than decluttering or owning less, although there's a chapter about that in there, because I think it's pretty important. And do you, as someone who's been following me for a while, are we going to be okay? People gonna like this, appreciate this, or do they think I'm going to go too far? I mean, there's a few conversations I'm sure we've had that set up some of my claims about work and some of those things in there, but we'll be all right, right? People are going to like it. I don't know. Like, it doesn't come out for another month, and you're like, I think people are going to like it, but maybe they're.
What I will say is that to me, I've had similar feelings too. I even wrote, I think, a guest post on your blog years ago about what happens after the physical decluttering. What now? Like, is this it? Have we reached the magical thinking? Oh, everything's going to be great now because I've reached this point. And so to me, this book answers the very logical next question of, okay, so that what? In order to do what? And so to me, that's what this book is really about. It's about taking those bits that you've cultivated, and yes, the conversation that we've had around like work and the value of it, and taking meaning from it, and that kind of thing. And I think it packages quite nicely. Now, I will say that the chapter on fear, I mean, I've spent 2 years of weekly work and lots of books, even getting to a place where I can understand what that feeling of fear is in my body and recognize when I'm feeling it instead of just kind of bouncing at the grocery store. Like, this is a good example of awareness, right? I'd be at the grocery store and at the checkout aisle and just like irritated and like kind of sweaty and just jittery and feeling really uncomfortable. And I just never really thought about that. Like, I never really processed what was going on for me. And so it took months to start checking in with myself, and instead of just dismissing those feelings of like anxiety or whatever, to where now it's like, okay, so I sit in the car for a minute and go, breathe, and just like check in with myself and go, okay, I'm grounded, good, let's go in. And then the act of finding everything I need is not as overwhelming as it once was when I would go in already anxious, you know? And so I'll say that the chapter on fear, it goes deep, right? Like, there's a lot of awareness there that needs to be built, but the book definitely does a really great job of giving you the areas for where to look, and for where to start exploring and to do that. Yeah, I found it very inspiring in that way, and I think it's a great number 3. I mean, it's a great follow up to the work you've done.
Thanks.
I think people are going to love it.
I would agree.
Yeah.
And I would agree. I would agree. I mean, certainly the chapter on overcoming, past mistakes in our lives isn't going to be what everyone needs to overcome all the past mistakes in their lives. But or the chapter on money, like why we constantly think that we need more and more money all the time. Like, one chapter isn't going to fix society's desire for more and more money, but if it can raise the issue, if it can get us to start thinking about it. I once heard someone describe college. He was like a president of a college or something. I don't remember his role. And he said, our job at college is to introduce subjects to young adults' minds that they'll be thinking about for the rest of their lives. And I look back at college and I'm like, that's it. Like, I was a banking and finance major, and I didn't learn everything about banking at college, but I learned the terms. Like, I learned how things function enough that now when I see news about banks, I can understand what's happening. And I took a film appreciation class, and not that I understand everything about movies, but now when I watch a movie, I can kind of filter it through what I learned in that class. And so anyway, that's a long answer to a non-question. But if it can just, raise some issues about, why do I constantly feel like I need more money all the time? Why do I just keep buying stuff that I don't need? Why is praise so important to me? Why am I counting down the days until retirement? And maybe starting to reframe some of that thinking is the goal.
I really love the bit on the exercise at the back of the book, where it walks you through the kind of things, because that's one of the things for me. It's been interesting because I have so many things that I've always loved doing, and so many things that I could do that it's been a bit hard to be, I guess, honest with myself about, like, where is that overlap in terms of something that I'm pretty good at, that I can develop over time, that there's actually a need for. And so those pages in the back actually were a great exercise as well, that I think people will really like. Sometimes it can take some just intentional thinking, right? We day to day. I mean, this is the book, right? Day to day, we just go through our lives chasing one thing after the next, sometimes without even stopping to pause and just take a breath and go, wait, what? Like, where am I? Where am I right now? What, like, am I doing? Why am I doing this? Is it because I'm avoiding something else? Is it because whatever? And there's a certain amount of self-compassion that I think we all need in this, because things are pretty crazy. Things are pretty intense out there. And that's it can be very difficult to pause. It can be painful to pause. And that awareness can be sometimes more difficult than not. But that's the only thing, the only way to change is to find that awareness. So got to find it somewhere.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. How do we get to the end of our lives with fewer regrets about how we live? And my thesis in the book is that we discern what things matter in the long run, and then we remove the distractions that are keeping us from that. And what we're all gifted and inclined to pursue and accomplish is different from anybody else. And so what is that? I moved that last section in the book, that bonus exercise about, so what do things matter to me, and what might my purpose be in the world? I originally had it earlier in the book, but we moved it to the end. So anyway, just a little background. I had it super early, and then my editor's like, let's put it back at the end. So
like a reference piece to go to. Yeah. One of the topics that stuck out to me, it applies very deeply to Break the Twitch and the kind of stuff. The last 2 years have been full of intensity when it comes to news and current events, and a lot of uncertainty. It seems like maybe there's just always been some level of uncertainty, especially when it comes to the news, when it comes to social media, Twitter, all of these things. And what I will say is that as someone who has to be on social media, or at least finds it one of the better mediums in which to reach a broad audience with the work that you're doing and that kind of thing, which you do acknowledge. I think it's easy to say, like, well, just delete it, don't use it. But there is a very real issue with a lot of people using it. From my personal experience, I saw that when the pandemic hit, I did a ton of doom scrolling. And just like the first month of the pandemic was just, I need to know more. What are the answers? And in the face of that uncertainty came a lot of emotional dysregulation, and a lot of not sleeping as much, and a lot of anxiety, and a lot of things that provided a lot of good fodder for therapy, but a lot of awareness when those feelings and emotions and those things are so dysregulated. I'm really curious about some of the strategies you talk about, your perspective on managing like this information overload during times of more intense disruption or conflict and things like that, while still showing up. I think that's a difficult balance.
For me, I think it comes down to when is all the information becoming a distraction from something that I can do or can accomplish in the world? I like news, and I like following current events, and it's something that I like doing, and I feel that I have a capacity to do. So it's something that I do, but there's a point where it can distract me, whether it's just the consuming my time reading social media feeds, reading stories, watching press conferences. Like I can, I was going to say, this could even become watching sports, like anything where it's just consuming more of my time than it should. Or it can be consuming my emotions or adding anxiety, stress onto my life that keeps me from pursuing things that matter. I think it's important to be informed, but there's a point where I can do some stuff, but I can't. Like I'm not making any of the significant decisions that are affecting, the war or the response to a pandemic. And so I don't know. I feel like I can discern when it's becoming too much. Usually after it's become too much, but I can get to, hey, wait a minute, why am I wasting all my time doing that when I can still raise my kids well, when I can still write a blog post and publish it, when I could still create a YouTube video that talks about something that I can control. And I don't think there's specific boundaries that I put in place or specific tools necessarily that I use. But just kind of that realization of, okay, it's good to be informed, but at some point the information can actually get in the way of the good things that I can do. And that's when I think becomes the problem.
Mm-hmm. It's that classic control circle, right? Things I can control, things I cannot control. Yeah. And how, like, is there a way that you've worked to foster awareness of that line? Like, how, this is one of the things that's been difficult for me is that I will take a 3-month break from Instagram, for example, and then for some reason go back after, oh man, everything is quantifiably better in my life. And then I go, you know what? Okay, I'm in a good spot. I should get back together with her. I think we can really make it work this time. And so I go back, and then it's light. It's easy. Oh, look at that post. And then week to week to week to week, within a month or two, I'm like back in this place where I'm checking, the Twitch is alive and well. And so I'm always curious about the built-in, how do we build that awareness of like, it's tightening its grip on me, and how can we really use these things in a way, if we do choose to use them, in a mindful way that aligns with our mission, our purpose.
Yeah. I once posted on Facebook. I posted a quote where I said, "You don't need to be on social media to make a difference in the world." And man, people got so upset that I posted that on social media, and they're like, "Well, what are you doing on social media?" And I said, "I'm not saying that you shouldn't be on social media. I'm not saying that you can't accomplish good on social media. I'm just saying you don't have to be on social media to make a difference in the world." My grandpa was a great example of just loved people and helped people and served people, but never had a Facebook account or Instagram account. But so anyway, that being said, like, because there is a spot where like you can use social media for good, and it allows me to do what I do in the world because of it. But it can very quickly become the thing that changes me rather than I use to change it or use it to help other people. And so, and both in just the way I see the world and in how much time goes into it. So how do I accommodate that? I write in the book about taking a fast, a technological fast, a digital detox, I call it. And I've done that pretty regularly, whether it's 29 days, I did it for 40 days one time, taking a week off, and a week isn't quite long enough, but 2 weeks I would say at a minimum, and just like separating yourself from technology as best you possibly can, and kind of reorienting yourself when you come back. So I think there's some annual stuff that we can do. For me, I can almost feel it at the end of every day, though, Anthony. Like I can go home from a work day and be like, man, what did I do today? Like what happened? I don't think I actually accomplished all that stuff. Oh yeah, I was listening to this all day long, and I was reading this all day long. And like you can see it at the end of the day, or at the end of an evening when you go to bed, and you're like, I think I just spent that whole night watching basketball games rather than talking to my daughter. Like what happened today? And trying to do better the next day. I think this is a distraction that we can do some specific things annually or even monthly. But the more I think we realize it every single day, then the more we can try different things. Like, okay, this isn't working clearly. Let me try putting the phone away right when I get home and not touching it until the next morning. And let me just see what that does, and if that makes me a better parent, and if it makes me a better spouse. I am going to block this social media site from my work computer and not go on it. Does this help me, or does this hurt my work? And evaluating that every day, I think.
Yeah, that's man, that kind of stuff is the big part of where the awareness comes into play. And I hear you kind of checking in with yourself at the end of each day and sort of doing what might you call it, a post-mortem for the day, a post-mortem diem. Is that, is that, is that?
Yeah, that's good. Perfect.
But like, that's a level of awareness that, I mean, especially for me, does not happen unless there is specific intentionality. And that's one of the things I've been learning and really stepping into is, what are the system checks that I can put into place that don't feel like something is trying to tell me what to do or confine me when I'm already, just kind of like just trying to get things done and go through. But that sort of process of slowing down a little bit to check in and go, what did today look like? And man, the fears and the stuff that you talk about have so much to do with, I think, us sort of avoiding some of that awareness. Or like, am I being the best? I don't have kids, but am I being the best father, or am I being the best partner? How did I show up today? And that can be a very scary question to ask. It was for me. It's less so now, but it's like, are we showing up with our full selves? Are we, accomplishing our potential? These are all these big questions of things, and having those checks, I think, it's critical. But I think, like, for me, I really had to build a lot of self-compassion into what that awareness would bring. So, like, what's the truth? Because in a lot of ways, in that experience, my brain would just not see the truth or allow myself that awareness until I got to a point where I was able to be kind enough to not judge myself harshly for what I saw. How do you decompress? How do you turn off at the end of the day and go into presence, grounding, not intense focus? How do you burn off maybe that built up, work? I don't know if you feel like the work anxiety, but throughout the day, the more I focus, the more kind of bouncy I become. So I got to do something to flip that switch. Is that something that you're doing consciously in terms of how you get grounded at the end of the day?
Probably the closest I can get to it is I used to work from home, and then which is everyone's dream, or was everyone's dream before the pandemic. I can't wait I just want to work from home. But I always had a hard time, I think, separating work from home when I worked from home all the time. And so started renting an office, and I think that drive time, it's 8 or 9 minute drive, so it was never like a huge drive, but it was a helpful one for me, just to be able to put work behind me and go on to what the thing is ahead, or leave home and go to work and try to get in that mindset. So I think that's probably played a bigger. It was several years now that I've done that, and probably plays a bigger role in accomplishing what you mean there. Just the time to I think reorient around the new role that I'm walking into. It's been helpful for me.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I do remember at one point in my life when I was working in an office and having that, like you just cross the finish line as you leave the office for the day. And I haven't felt that since 2016, but there is a certain amount of space that little mini ritual of just transporting yourself from one place to the other would be like, help switch the modes. That makes perfect sense. I wonder what other kind of rituals can be implemented that would create a similar effect. I don't know. I didn't find it.
I didn't. I'm thinking we'll just go for a walk, and I'm like, I'm sure I tried a lot of different things, and it was never.
I have too.
It was never quite the same as grabbing my bag and walking out to the car and driving home.
Yeah, there's something to be said for that, for sure. There's something to be said for that. So this came up early on in your books and in your work, is this idea of you're cognitively dissenting from the public opinion. How do we face this pressure, step into it, right? Like, what does that look like in terms of saying, you know what, everyone's doing this thing. I don't want to do that thing, but I still want to fit in and sort of have social connections and things like that. Is that a confidence thing? Is that like a just really believing in what we want kind of thing? Where do you think that can be generated from in terms of going the opposite direction?
So I've put a lot of thought into like envy and jealousy and those types of things, and it stems from minimalism. And if I'm going to own fewer things, like, am I going to be jealous of other people who have stuff, or how am I going to help my kids not be jealous? And it occurs to me that the best way to overcome envy, and then I'll get to your question more specifically. The best way to overcome envy in our lives is to know that we are spending our money and our time on things that actually matter in the long run. And so if I'm donating to a charity that I believe in, or if I take a job where I make less pay, but it's around something that I'm very passionate about, then I don't care if my neighbor bought a new boat, because I'm using my money aligned. I'm taking my resources and I'm directing it towards things that I believe are more meaningful and fulfilling in the long run. And so that's kind of my view on minimalism. And so when it comes to like other conversations about society and living differently than how everyone else is living, and if that's important to me or if I fall into that, like if I just know that I'm pursuing things that actually matter with my life, then I don't care if I'm living a little bit differently than someone else. And I'm sure the temptations are always there to just fall into chasing other things. But like, no, I own fewer things than other people might, but that's okay because I know why I'm doing it. And I don't pursue minimalism so that I can have a whole bunch of money in my bank account, because I don't think there's much satisfaction there in the long run. And if there's no satisfaction there, then I'm just going to fall back into buying what everyone else is buying, or living how everyone else is living. And so, yeah, I think you even said it in your question about, I think when we're intentional about the right things, then it becomes easier to remain intentional in all areas of life, regardless of what anyone else is doing and pursuing.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Did I say that? That's pretty specific.
And there's probably, yeah, you did. I'm pretty sure you did. Or at least it came into my mind.
Well, fair enough.
And I think there's probably a bit of arrogance in that answer, just as I say it. Well, if everyone else, are you saying everyone else is pursuing things that are wrong? And I probably am. I think people can be chasing the wrong things with their life, and I think society and culture has kind of painted this picture of where you're going to find fulfillment and what the things are worth that you should be chasing with your life. And I don't think that those are always the right things we're supposed to be doing. Just like you said, I think some of the systems are designed to benefit those who created them, and Yeah, I mean, I don't think every commercial on television trying to convince me to buy their thing has my best self-interest in mind, and I think it's very easy. So here's maybe where the arrogance comes out of this, is that I know I'm just as susceptible to be chasing certain things. Like, I know the distraction is prevalent all of the time and every day of my life, and I need to constantly be intentional about what I'm pursuing and what I'm chasing, and when I'm specific and intentional about that, and when I'm working hard to eliminate some of those other distractions, then I feel like I can be satisfied with the day that I lived, and ultimately the life that I lived.
Well, I love that. Yeah, maybe.
Thank goodness, because I talked a long time.
Well, I think this gets into the realm of where does healthy. It's this idea of obviously we know the very negative connotation to narcissism, but there is the flip side of that, which is a level of healthy ego or healthy, like positive narcissism, which is not typically a word we associate positively. But in the literature, that's kind of what it talks about, where it says like we can believe that we are making the right choice for us and not let insecurity kind of drive us to just wanting to fit in because that's what everyone else is doing, and still wanting to be a kind, generous, loving person to the people that we interact with and choose to spend our time with, while understanding that they're going to make choices and it's not our role necessarily to like try to control or change what they're doing, but that we can believe in that we are doing the right thing for us, and it can look different. And so it takes a little bit of ego. I think it takes a little bit of a healthy ego to be willing to step into something different and not let the opinion of others go like, well, you don't have a boat, are you really? You can't be doing all that well, right? Like there's all that. That's all the keeping up with the Joneses, all that good stuff.
I don't ever know if boat is the perfect example for that. It sounds a bit much, but when I was in Vermont, my neighbor bought a boat, and it was and parked it in his driveway. Like, I was pursuing minimalism, and he had just bought a boat like during that time, and so it's always like the thing that comes to my mind of, there's my neighbor buying a boat, and I'm trying to get rid of everything that I have. So it's a funny example. But
it's maybe a perfect example because that old saying, what are the two best days of a boat owner's life is the day they get it and the day they sell it. So maybe it applies better than you might imagine. I appreciate this work. I appreciate the book, and I think a lot of people are going to love it.
Things That Matter: Overcoming Distraction to Pursue a More Meaningful Life by Joshua Becker. Should be available about anywhere you search.
There we go.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks for coming on.